Hello and welcome to the easternKicks podcast, a regular magazine programme about East Asian film led by me, Andrew Heskins, founder and grandmaster of easternKicks.com, and James Mudge, our leading writer.
Hey-o.
Each episode we'll be taking a look at the latest films, news and festivals, often chatting to filmmakers and stars along the way. Welcome to our latest show. This time we have a special edition to celebrate the return of Wong Kar-wai's classics to the big screen in brand new restorations. We have a special guest with Bede Cheng, Managing Director at L'Immagine Ritrovata Asia, to chat about the restoration process and specifically bringing those films back to life. Meanwhile, our contributors, Theo, Ethan G, Phillip O'Connor, Colette Bauman, Yonah and Stephen Palmer share their thoughts on the auteur. But first, it's been something a little bit different. We've just enjoyed lunch that's been provided for us by the amazing guys at Bun House in London's Chinatown, with sister venue One's Tea Room and Bar in Soho, which has been the absolute perfect fuel for recording this podcast.
Very nice.
It's especially appropriate as downstairs at One's Tea Room and Bar is actually based on the look and style of In the Mood for Love. It's a really great atmospheric spot.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And we're not just saying that. It's actually
it's genuinely very, very fun. It's nice, man.
Yeah,
very cool.
Really good place to have a drink, some great food. So I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No doubt.
Hi all, it's Phillip, and today I wanted to talk to you about the 1988 directorial debut of Wong Kar-wai with As Tears Go By. Having written in Hong Kong since at least the early 1980s, this is the very first film from Wong Kar-wai, and in many ways it's kind of a blueprint for how you do a loving homage to a Scorsese film without actually ripping off Scorsese. In the film, Wah, played by Andy Lau, is a low-level lieutenant within a Hong Kong triad who's looking out for his juniors, including his younger brother, Fly, played by Jackie Chung, and navigating the requests of his seniors while keeping the other gangs at bay. In this film, he comes across his cousin, played by Maggie Kyung. The film goes from being a standard crime boilerplate drama to a more, as I mentioned earlier, Scorsesean exploration of the limits of happiness for a gang member in any criminal enterprise. Wah desperately wants to get out. I don't mean that he's making plans. I mean he just only has a set lifespan, and he knows this. As avenues are closed down to him to escape from this kind of life, his cousin offers a way, if not to escape, but to see that life could have been different for him if he had chosen a different way forward. The film itself is awash with aspects that would go on to become trademarks of Wong Kar-wai. Greasy, neon-drenched nighttime scenes, endlessly, optimistically looking sunrises, dark, foreboding, brooding sense of dread for a main character who knows that something is coming down the line that they cannot escape from, and two excellent performances from Maggie Kyung and Andy Lau. I don't give Andy Lau nearly enough credit, despite the fact that the gentleman, a 40-year veteran of Hong Kong, he is a singer, songwriter, actor and film producer, and his range goes from the mild, innocent confectionery comedy romances that he's done over the years to really dark, serious content in the form of things like Infernal Affairs. And in here, Wah is just trapped. You can almost feel like you're in the glass jar with him as the water is poured down on top of him. There's no sense that he's ever going to get away from this, but he puts up such a valiant fight that you are there with him for every single blow and every single bad turn. On the opposite side of it, Maggie Kyung, who at this point in her career had done romantic comedies and had been Jackie Chan's foil in the Police Story and Project A films. And here is a tragic figure in that she really wants to be happy with Wah. There is no way the film will allow her to be that way, and yet she keeps such an effervescence in her character and a stillness and a fragility that as Wah discovers more about her, we do too. Just as she brings out the best in Wah, he brings out the best in her, taking her from a closed-off shell that her illness that she suffers from in the film restricts her to, but that at the same time allows her the perspective that she does. So as they interact with one another, she becomes more and more assertive in herself. And by the end of the film, she becomes the person she wants to be. While other people have paid homage or straight up ripped off Martin Scorsese's tropes and angles for his mob and crime dramas, I would say that As Tears Go By is probably the best clone of a Scorsese storyline without actually ripping it off. It has tragedy, pathos, amazing chemistry between the two leads. The look of the film just make you feel like you're catching that 11 o'clock train out of the city centre, desperately hoping to get out before the trouble goes down. As a directorial debut, the film is confident, assured, and knows exactly where it starts, where it goes, and where it's going to end up. While more accessible than his trilogy of Days of Being Wild, In the Mood for Love, and 2046, it is a perfect tonic to the films he was making at about the same time, such as Chungking Express. So it is an interesting film to watch and see where he goes as a director, where his earliest thoughts started to formulate. And I would argue an excellent starting point, albeit that it is his debut, for anyone who's seriously considering to getting into Wong Kar-wai's films.
And now to a chat with Bede Cheng about the restoration process. Thanks for coming on the show, Bede. I think if we can start with actually more of a general discussion about, what is a restoration?
Well, without going into too much technical details, although restoration in general means, putting something back to its original state. But of course, it's a very strange term because once something is damaged, is never really what it originally was. So in terms of film restoration, we try to put the film back to what it looks like when it came out at that time. Maybe it was 70s or 60s or something even longer or further away. But of course, it will never be the same as it was. So in general, we try not to mess up with it. We try to, the philosophy we call is a kind of a minimal interruption or minimal, whatever it's called. It's just doing whatever is necessary to fix the problems and try to make it look good, and not too much overdone. Because like in this day and age, we are in this world of high definition TV, whatever, we are so used to very, very clean, crisp, sharp images that appears on our television or computer screens. And so we try not to do too much in that direction. We try to restore a film in what it would have looked like at the time when it was released. Okay.
And how do you actually go about doing that, just as a process? I mean, obviously, it's with computers and stuff, but how do you actually clean up? Because when we say restore, like a painting or something, we can imagine how you'd actually go about doing that on the painting, but how do you actually, do that with a film?
Well, for film restoration, we always opt to go for the start from the original camera negatives, which was actually part of the film elements that were actually existing inside the camera itself when the scene was being shot. Because the original camera negative was the original material, original source of the image, it should have the most of the visual information that was in the scene when it was taken. And also it should be the one that sustained the least damage, because usually when the original negatives was prepared and processed or cut, and it would be put away in the vault of the film company or the processing lab. And after it been processed into the positive and subsequently in the negative and all that. Okay, try not to get in too much to these terms now. And then, of course, after the initial work has been done, right, the original negatives are usually being put away and being stored. So that's why the original camera negatives should be the least damaged, and also it's got the most visual information of the film. So we try to work from there. And so what we do is we find out, we got the negatives, the original negatives, and we check it, we clean it, we repair it if there's some torn perforations or sprockets that are broken. We clean it, and one very time-consuming process that we do a lot in Hong Kong is that we take off the tape that's original, the splicing tape that hold the film together. Because usually in Southeast Asia, in Hong Kong particularly, most of the films were shot very quickly and have to be processed very quickly and put onto release very quickly. The editors would just use some very tough tapes to just put them together quickly. So in order for the original negatives can be put into process, the next step of the process. But then after a while, after many years, these splicing tapes get kind of melted, get sticky, and get the color changes, because they're kind of different elements from the celluloid itself. So it kind of deteriorates at a different degree, and sometimes it got the chemicals will eat into the original celluloid. So one process that we do is to take out the splicing tape and retape them. Then we put the repair negatives into a washing machine, which is like is what works on ultrasound, which is like the machine that you put your glasses to be washed in the opticians.
All right.
It just uses ultrasound to shake off all the dust, all the very minute dust that because any dust that appears on the film it could appear to be 5 feet across on the big screen. So it shakes off all the excessive dust, and after that we put this washed negatives onto the scanner, which is the usually we do in 4K now. So do I go into pause now, or you got questions along the way? I can go on for a long time.
No, it's really it's really interesting. No, it's really interesting because it's a process we all hear these terms like restoration, remastering and stuff, but even when me and Andy were talking about this chat, I just realized that I know almost nothing about the process. So yeah, please, keep continue.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's okay. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Okay, after is where we scan it. Okay, we through the scanner, which is the scanner at 4K. That means that's about 4,096 pixels horizontally and 2,000 something vertically. So imagine that you got a film that's a 35 mm film. Imagine it got horizontally, it's got about over 4,000 pixels. So there's one frame that's about 15 megabytes. And then one film, talk about a 100-minute film, that's about 150,000 frames. So you can do your math.
No, I'm not going to.
I'm not, yeah.
But it's a lot.
Yeah.
So you can so if you try to open one single frame on your home computer, I almost guarantee your computer go dead because there's too much files, there's too much information for it to handle at a normal home computer. So with this film, which will be about 8 to 10 terabytes.
Wow.
Very geeky thing, okay? Terabytes.
Yeah.
And
That's massive.
That's
Yeah,
massive.
that's
Yes, that's massive. We'll send it. We copy it onto hard drives. Sorry,
Yeah.
we still don't have enough connection or widthband able to zoom it across the world yet. We put on copy on hard drive. It will take about 2 to 3 days to copy it all, and send it to our company headquarters in Italy, at Bologna, Italy, to do the restoration work, where they'll keep on working frame by frame, and then come after that you'll do the color grading, and it depends what the client wants. Some color grading be done in Italy, some color grading done in Hong Kong, as for the Wong Kar-wai films. And that's about it.
How do you make sure that you keep all the information from that from each frame?
Well, what we do when we scan is we produce a what we call a raw scan, which means we don't do too much setting. We just set the basic information, set it onto the computer and let it do it, and we don't try to put on temper it too much, because we try to produce an honest as the plain the image as it is when it was, and all the rest of it, whatever the color, the special effects, will be done at a later stage. Because if you temper with the original setting, which means your original the original files you have, they're not really the original stuff. Because it is, imagine you take a picture of your iPhone, and then you just adjust all the settings to change the color, and that the original photo you have is not really original natural color photo.
Yeah.
So we avoid doing this, because I know some people don't do that because they try to save time and money. But we always insist of doing a raw scan, not temper with the original material that we scan. Also, actually, the scanning itself is also a very time-consuming process, because you talk about scanning a 1,000 feet reel, that takes about 8 hours.
Oh, okay.
It's a very slow process, because when you talk, for those of you who are not familiar with these terms of reels, and 1,000 feet reel is about around 9 to 10 minutes. On screen, okay. So it takes 8 hours to scan it, just normal speed. And that's a lot of numbers, I know.
Yeah.
It is, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, it gives it's hadn't been aware. I mean, it's such a huge and time-consuming thing. Even just that sort of getting it set up before you actually even start anything like color grading or the work and everything like that, which is, I imagine, is probably the main challenge, is actually locating those original materials in some cases for films.
Yeah, and sometimes it is the films have actually various different materials, and it takes a lot of time just to find which is the original version, which happens to a lot of those martial arts films made in Hong Kong in the 70s, because there have been the various different versions for Hong Kong, North America, Europe, Japan, Indonesia, Singapore, whatever. Sometimes you don't even know what the original version is. And then it takes so much time just to find out who goes what and what goes where.
And so, I mean, generally, how do you make those decisions? How do you find out which? Because with some of those films, the directors,
they're dead, gone.
No longer,
I don't care.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't care. All of the above.
Well, we try to find out if there are some video materials around, and DVDs, VHS, beta, whatever, and try to piece together, and sometimes, of course, the film company, the client, would give us some feedback of what they want, but then, that's unless the director is still alive. But actually, talk about the Wong Kar-wai things. Actually, they don't have much different versions. Actually, it's pretty much straightforward. Yeah. So don't have this myth that he's keeping different versions somewhere. Not as far as I know. They talk about Wong Kar-wai, there's all kinds of myths floating around.
That's true.
There are. I mean, we'll come on to that in a minute, but should we run through some of the other work that you've been doing? I mean, we talk about the martial art films of the 70s and 80s and so on. I mean, I remember us talking a few years back about how Jackie Chan was invading your dreams. You were working on so many Jackie films. But what are the other films that you've been working on outside of Wong Kar-wai?
We have been working just from the top of my head. We finished the two Fong Sai-yuk movies, starring Jet Li, the latest stage Jet Li. Actually, we also did Jet Li's first film, The Shaolin Temple, which was made in 1980 or 81. Very young, 16 or 17 at that time. And we did the police story Jackie Chan, and we just finished the 3 Infernal Affairs trilogy.
Okay.
It's the latest, okay. We did a fair amount of Stanley Kwan films, The Center Stage, Love Unto Waste, Lan Yu. Lan Yu. And Heroic Trio, the Chen Xiu-tong, Johnny Cho fantasy thing. The two of them actually. The Hero Trio, Executioners. The older ones we did Brighter Summer Day, Taipei Story. That's the Taiwan films. We did Xiao Wu. That's Jia Zhengke's first or second feature film. And so actually we also do a lot of kung fu films that are mostly forgettable. So it's not glam and artsy as some people would thought would have. Actually, that's the bread and butter that keep us going.
So how do these projects come about? Do you get approached by the distributors or by like the people that own the films? Or are they distributors in the US and the UK, or how does some of these projects start up?
Yeah, various sources. In terms of Wong Kar-wai, there was a project initiated by the Criterion Collection, and sometimes we work a lot with the Film Foundation that was set up by Martin Scorsese. That helps to fund the restoration of mostly third world films. We work with the distributors, the Fortune Star, which owns a large chunk of the Hong Kong film library from the 80s and 90s. Big film companies. Sometimes the director could approach us, or sometimes the people who own the film could approach us. So it comes at various places. Yeah. And now, we do some work. We work for some government agencies too, and of course, they're not kung fu films as you expect, and sometimes they're historical archival films. And so.
How many did you get through in a year then? Just very roughly.
Wow. I started.
It sounds like they take a long time. So it's just very in an average year. Like how many do you think you would?
Ooh, that's a good question. I never counted.
Too many or?
Too many is probably between 50 and 100.
Wow.
Because is for the last talking about. Well, we started the Hong Kong lab in 2015, so we now lost count now. 6th year.
Yeah.
So we do average about 10 to maybe 10 or 12 films a year. So that's maybe 100 or a little less than 100 actually. Yeah.
Cool.
Wow, so much. I can't believe that.
Hello everyone, my name is Ethan, and you guys can call me a bit of a cinema frantic, as I've always loved Chinese and Hong Kong cinema growing up, watching films from many acclaimed directors like Zhang Yimou, Jia Zhangke, Chen Kaige, Jiang Wen, and most importantly, Stephen Chow and Wong Kar-wai. I love to dig deeper into means of contemporary filmmaking, applying media theories within texts of production. I wanted to explore new concept debates and use theoretical approaches to film. The fluidity of our current industry has complicated our understanding of international media and film production, distribution and exhibition. But anyways, I'm here to talk about Wong Kar-wai, one of my favourite Hong Kong directors. And the reason why is because he's been given an excellent reputation, the way he's been labelled to represent the Hong Kong Chinese art, cinema, literature, culture. The film Days of Being Wild is in fact one of my favourite films of all time. It's about a man that tries to find out who his real mother is after the woman who raised him tells him the truth. It's a simple concept and storyline, and yet with great statistics, cinematography, lighting, pervasive soundtrack and much more to show the inner personalities of Wong Kar-wai as well as his filmmaking. I also really love the character that Leslie Chung plays, Ah Fei. His delicate performance and charming voice made him the only endorsement of Ah Fei. The classic monologue is also worshipped by the posterity and endless imitation. Ah Fei called himself a footless bird because he was lonely and pathetic, so he could only fly non-stop for a moment, just as he could not escape the puzzle life except for death, wandering and struggling and depressed, never willing to stop. At the same time, Ah Fei is a character that makes women fall in love and hate. He used classic minutes and tricks to attract the conductor Su Li Zhen and then embrace the dancer Lulu. This is not the same as his life experience when he was abandoned by his biological mother and restrained by his adoptive mother when he was young. It doesn't matter. He regards the female characters appearing in his life as a stepping point in the journey. He always has to fly non-stop until his death. In my main opinion, the storyline of the film is the chase, the abandonment and self-destruction between a few men and women. From a symbolic point of view, this may reflect the wandering powerlessness of Hong Kong people during the 1990s and the rootless confusion. I always thought of Leslie Chung as a talented actor. His mature interpretational style was unparalleled. He always cast his own unique vibes into it. Just like this film, Ah Fei's eyebrows and backs and other emotions are conveyed perfectly. This world is happy and disturbing, and I feel like Leslie Chung interpreted that through his character. Now I feel we can see a bit of his character in every single one of us.
So should we get on to talking a bit more about the Wong Kar-wai films? So Criterion instigated this.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you were saying about Wong Kar-wai, he how much involvement did he have?
Well, he all through the process, he was kind of flying between Hong Kong and Shanghai, I think. And he would kind of come and look at the color mostly, and he would comment on it. The colorist who's based in Hong Kong, because he appoints the colorist that he works with to work on this project again. So the colorist is very good. Miss Carmen Loy, she's very trusted by Wong Kar-wai. So kind of Wong Kar-wai would give him the general direction of what he wants, what he would like to have, and she would try it out and then kind of show it to him again, and then he would come back and do a little bit comment, and yeah, just basically what it was. It's kind of like some back and forth, and he actually, I think this pretty much his style, like his filmmaking style. He kind of gives a general direction of what he's hoping for and just let the people work on it.
Was there any input from the original cinematographers on the process, of Mark Lee Bing or Christopher Doyle?
No, actually, no. But Chris Doyle came in to see Chungking Express with Wong Kar-wai, and they were very happy. They were laughing all the way. It's sometimes, like you say, it's kind of like a nostalgic moment for them, a nostalgic reunion for them, actually, in a way. So, I mean, it's kind of surreal, you know. It's like watching Chungking Express with Wong Kar-wai and Chris Doyle. Yeah, and but no, the cinematographers were not involved, actually. Yeah.
Theo, how?
I think that ultimately the thing about Wong Kar-wai is, considering that In the Mood for Love is often what people remember about what he's made. I know that he's done other famous films, but that's quite a demure, heartbreaking film. But in his other films, he's really very funny, and deliberately so. So I want to talk about Fallen Angels and why I think that the best part about it is that it is deliberately very, very funny, and that's part of what makes it such an easy, ebullient watch. And it's specifically about Takeshi Kanashiro's character, Ho-Chi Mo, who, I mean, even just describing the whole thing that he does, he breaks into places of work out of hours and does his own work there. And he doesn't see there as being a problem with this, he just sees it as part of, the hustle and grind of daily life, which results in him doing, baffling things when he's throwing leaflets in people's faces, but he's never doing it in a malicious way. And him, at least, if not Wong, displays kind of this element of childlike wonder at being in this new big city that one doesn't fully understand, but you're doing your best to, pretend to be an adult and, work hard. And he's able to find joy in the city, where the killer in it, played by Leon Lai, finds just almost this intense boredom. And that really comes to a head when then Ho Chi Mo is filming his adopted father, the man who runs the hotel, and that's a lot more joyous rather than funny, but it's this sort of juxtaposition of the jaded and, you know, the new face makes Fallen Angels legitimately really very funny, and that's why I think that it's my favourite of the Wong Kar-wai films that I've seen.
Because we've seen some quotes from him and stuff talking about the remasters, about them being, you know, different films and the audience being different and everything, and there are some quite significant changes, you know, especially to some of the films, and the color, you know, the aspect ratios and everything. So it must have been quite a fairly complicated job, I'd have guessed, you know, dealing with these very sort of recognizable films.
Yes, in a way, he, as expected, he's someone who's demanding. But I think he knows what he's looking for. Contrary to what a lot of people think, he knows what he's looking for, and he's one thing that kind of impressed me is that he could spot things that no one else could. It was like this scene where like 10 dozen people have seen it 10 times already, and we cannot find anything wrong with it. And then he came and said, this is how it is. Really? And then we look at it again. Oh yeah, there's really something in it. So he does spot things that people don't see, and maybe that's one reason why he wears his sunglasses all the time, I suspect. And by the way, he doesn't wear sunglasses while watching his own films. Okay, in the theater. Okay. So I know he's watching with a not with shaded glasses, not watching film with shaded glasses. Okay. And talk about the aspect ratio. He changed the aspect ratio of Fallen Angels, and the colors are. Yeah, the colors were altered. They were different from the original film version, and of course, there's been a lot of controversy about it. Yeah,
a lot of chat about it.
Yeah, a lot. In this day and age, where everyone can post on the internet, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, and everyone becomes a critic and everyone becomes someone. And then a lot of people were commenting even before they see the film. They're just commenting on someone's screen cap. That's a thing.
Yeah.
And I can say that all the colors were to his satisfaction, and this restoration was giving him a chance to do things that he was not able to do in a way, because with the modern technology now, they can get the colors exactly to what they want, and it's like you are able to work from the confines of film. But I know a lot of people who are diehard fans of film, celluloid film, they will think, okay, this is not right. But you may honestly ask yourself, when's the last time you see a Wong Kar-wai film on film in a theater? We're just talking about 20 years ago, at least. How well can you honestly remember what you saw? Because before we started on In the Mood for Love, we actually took out a 35mm copy and watched the whole film. And then after seeing that, all the myth in my head was gone. I mean, this is not talking about it's not beautiful, but then it was good at its way at that time. But then you look at it, it kind of is not, the color was not as great as you had anticipated it to be. So the way it's been doing on this time is generally we tone down the colors, not to as bright as it was, but still very lush. And then, I mean, really, you got a chance, you really see it in the theater. I mean, all of them, see them in the theater to appreciate it instead of reading from someone's screen cap.
No, absolutely. I mean, for me, especially, probably Andy as well. Like, I mean, I wouldn't have seen these films in the cinema when they came out. Stuff like In the Mood for Love and stuff. I'm not going to say I was young, but I was younger, and I was seeing them on a DVD, which was not even a great quality DVD by DVD standards, which is how I've seen a lot of them.
Some of those late 90s Hong Kong.
Yeah, exactly. And so, for me, that's what's interesting is this idea of, the memory some people might have of these films is not necessarily visually connected to how it was when they saw.
In some way,
films
that feels
in
almost a
respects.
bit ironic to have this idea of memory when we're talking about Wong Kar-wai, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know this argument could go on forever and ever, and also, I mean, maybe some people will be jumping up and down just hearing what I said. No, you're messing up things. I'm going to tell that. But okay, if I was someone just an average Joe from somewhere, doing some Photoshop thing, okay, but then it's the director, the person who created the work himself, he was doing it. I mean, if you were given a chance, you would probably do the same.
Oh yeah,
you probably do the same to do the things that you try to make your work better. Yeah.
No, I think that's what's really interesting about this whole process, and I think for some people that's where like restoration versus remastering versus revisioning. There's so much like throwing around different terms.
And then
to me, or other ones.
To me, a restoration. The term restoration has been abused in ways like to sell DVDs of old movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like you have some high school. They probably some lab some kind of high school kid, and then who knows Photoshop and this click, and then they sell it and put a label on it, restored, and then try to sell it.
Absolutely, and that's why, for me, I'm really looking forward to seeing these on the big screen.
Yeah, it's really good. Try to see them on the big screen. Yeah.
Okay, so for I think one final question: is there a beloved film you have that you would love to see restored?
Oh, I mean, any film.
Any film you like.
I would go for something even older, probably. Just something that that's as someone who grew up watching the old Hong Kong cinema. There are a few of them. I would name the story of Discharged Prisoner. Have you heard of it? That rings a bell.
Yeah.
That's the original inspiration for Better Tomorrow. Of course, it's a very. It is a film that's different from. It was ahead of its time. It was made in the late '60s, and it's got all the elements of what a contemporary film should look like. Of course, except the color and the dresses, but then. And
that would be fabulous to see in a restaurant.
Yeah, I know. And also, it holds a very personal sentiment for me, because my mother is a good friend of the producer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used to as a kid I used to play at the house many times, and then I used to see them working. Go down studios shooting movies. Maybe that's how the genes of filmmaking in me developed initially. So if I were to pick, I would pick that, of course. But Sadly, I don't think the negatives are around anymore. We can just only work from a positive. But that is is incredible. This impact of the film has, and also the subsequent remake, and how this remake has impact Hong Kong film industry, the Southeast Asian film industry, and because of course it was remake by John Woo, and that remake, that Better Tomorrow, became like the biggest hit in Korea. It's like every kid growing up in Korea in the 80s, 90s, they all knew this film by heart. And of course that impact the Korean action film genre too.
Definitely.
Yeah, I still see this K-drama, or sometimes it's even this a Korean comedy, what's it called, Extreme Job.
Yeah.
About these wacky cops who stick out at this fried chicken store. I mean, in the end, it was like an absolute tribute to Better Tomorrow. Yeah. So that's, in a way, that shows the impact of, the Hong Kong film has on the world, and particularly in Southeast Asia. Yeah.
Well, a lovely way to end. Thank you so much, Bede.
Yeah, that was fun. That was very, very... It was really interesting.
Hello, my name is Yonah. I've been working with easternKicks for 7 years. My favorite Wong Kar-wai film is 2046, because I was a huge fan for In the Mood for Love, and I've never seen a sequel kind of combine the main character's fictionalized reality with his current reality, and also kind of his memory, his nostalgia, and I thought Wong Kar-wai did that beautifully. And I also think that the visuals are even as good as In the Mood for Love, if not better, because we get to kind of see Wong Kar-wai play around with a sci-fi universe. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Colette Bowman.
Wong Kar-wai might not be a prolific director. The type of director that we're used to seeing these days, when films can be made so much quicker and all the processes can be or are sped up. Instead, Wong Kar-wai has got a oeuvre of films that are films that he takes time over. They're films that he cherishes. And they're films that we as viewers cherish. Because there's something about a Wong Kar-wai film that moves you, that makes you feel empathy for the characters, that connects you to their world, that you feel transported. It's something to do with his use of colour, his understanding of colour and texture. With Ashes of Time, Wong Kar-wai works with Christopher Doyle. Christopher Doyle is a very famous Hong Kong Australian cinematographer that made a number of films with Wong Kar-wai. And one of those films was Ashes of Time. And there's something that is kind of unique when they come together. The kind of presentation of space. And I think also it's the understanding of Christopher Doyle of what Wong Kar-wai wants. He's able to communicate that. He's able to know what Wong Kar-wai wants to do, what his kind of theory of film is, if you like. And I think it's something that's really I think important to stress is that we tend to kind of, I think in the West, kind of over-fetishize the director. And we don't talk about anybody else. But, you know, when I talk about Wong Kar-wai's films, when I think about Wong Kar-wai's films, I think about the ones with Christopher Doyle, but I also think about the cast, and I think of the films as collaborations. And that's kind of something I think is more useful to think about, that the film is not a product of one person. So with Wong Kar-wai, you can tell his films with Christopher Doyle as a cinematographer from the films where he doesn't have Christopher Doyle, a cinematographer, that there's a distinction between these films. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind. The other thing, and the other reason that I kind of wanted to talk about Ashes of Time, is because it's the last film that Bridget Lin and Leslie Chung made together. And I talked about this on a different podcast, but I love Bridget Lin and Leslie Chung, and I think they were just unique actors, and they brought something special, and they sort of completed each other, and they were kind of together. They were more than they were individually. Yeah, individually, for me, I don't know, the kind of the fine actors, and that might kind of sound odd, because especially Bridget Lin kind of was quite challenging in the roles she took. So, for example, with The Swordsman, where she plays a Japanese character. She plays a character called Evil Asia. And the whole Swordsman trilogy is around sort of gender. And she appears in the second and the third films in the trilogy. But there's something about her. And there's something about her when she comes together with Leslie Chung. And I think Leslie Chung is one of the greatest Hong Kong actors of all time. Without a doubt. And I'm forever heartbroken that he's no longer with us. I'm forever heartbroken that such a talented man who had so much to offer couldn't be with us, couldn't stay with us. So I don't traditionally get, you know, I see death as a part of life, and I don't really, it's not something that concerns me. But with Leslie Chung, it concerns me. I'm very sad and I'm very sorry. And I think he was very young. And I'm just so sad, you know. I'm so sad that I never got to see him in concert. I would have loved to, because he was a singer as well as a director and actor. This kind of hugely multi-talented man. So I always have a sadness or a sorrow when I watch Leslie Chung, but I think we have these wonderful performances that are part of his legacy. And also perhaps part of his legacy is a legacy of, you know, understanding difference, about, you know, letting people be people without those expectations on them. And I think, you know, however much it hurts that he couldn't stay around, I think that his life is just very meaningful and continues to be very meaningful. So I know I've digressed. But yeah, so that's why Ashes of Time is particularly meaningful for me. It's, as I said, an early Wong Kar-wai film. What happens is that there's kind of multiple copies made of Ashes of Time, because different countries have different regulations in terms of censorship. And so that, you know, there are bits that have to be cut out depending when it's been shown. The kind of original, if you like, reel, that was kept in a that was kind of locked away and preserved was lost because there was a fire. So Wong Kar-wai kind of 2008 makes the decision that he wants to kind of restore his film, or that he wants to make the Ashes of Time then that he would have made in 1994 if he could have done. So he reshoots some of it. So he reshoots some of the film, and he also kind of puts inserts in the film. So the film actually is perhaps might not seem connected in the sense that we think about narrative, or we think about how narrative works. It doesn't have one character that we follow. It has 5 characters, and it has different parts to it, and we go from one character to the next character, and it's not necessarily easy to know how they're linked together, or to put the whole together. I think that's, and this is again about an understanding of narrative, and narrative as something that's circular, and time which is circular, rather than narrative which is something that works towards an end goal. I think there's a very different sensibility. But I think what he does with the kind of restoration is he puts intertitles. So in each of the kind of bits of the film that kind of moves away or moves into another character's perspective, we actually now have some sort of map. So he provides the kind of international audience with the map. And I kind of think that's the difference. I think that, in 1994, Wong Kar-wai is not the international director. It's not the international feted director. By 2008, he is. So he's thinking about how his film will be received, and he's putting these kind of like arrows in to help us navigate the film, if you like. So it's interesting. I mean, I can see both. Well, I've seen multiple versions of the film, if you like. You can find them. They are on YouTube, but, there's no kind of original film, if you like. So, I mean, the film itself is very much within Doyle's universe, Wong Kar-wai's universe, in that it's about time, it's about growing older, it's about regret, it's about love, it's about passion, it's about honour, it's about feelings, it's about sensibility. And also I think it's about, looking back on his youth and, do we regret the things we didn't do when we were younger? How do we navigate that? And one of the things that I know with my work on kind of East Asian culture, it's certainly this sense of youth is particularly central, is particularly important, has particularly resonance, if you like, as kind of centre of one's identity. So it's interesting that he kind of takes his kind of characters and, when they're kind of older, and, and it's about, I think, have you lived a good life? Have you got any regrets over it? And I think his film was all about regret and about not having regret. So, I mean, it's kind of difficult for me to say to you, well, what is Ashes of Time about? I think it's, it's a beautiful film. It's got these wonderful performances. Bridget Lin, who plays both a kind of male character and a female character, or I would kind of say is a really early example of a non-binary character, because she appears as kind of both, and there's nothing to tell you which character she's meant to be, or which character they're meant to be. So I think that's really interesting as well. So I think it's about love, and I think it's about loss. and it's about time getting away from us. But it's also, I think, about coming to terms with ourselves and our kind of, our failings, our limitations. And then perhaps the kind of notion that change is possible, in the way change was possible with Ashes of Time, when he was able to kind of remake the film when he was older. And as I said, Wong Kar-wai is one of my favourite directors. I love Hong Kong cinema. I love the exploitation of Hong Kong cinema. I love the experimentation of Hong Kong cinema. And I think Wong Kar-wai is just, one of the masters of cinema. And I've yet to see a film that I'm disappointed. And he's always pushing. And he takes his time. And I think you should take your time over art. You can find some of the earlier versions of Ashes of Time online, or you can buy the DVD or watch it streaming. But I do recommend it, for completionists or for people that like Hong Kong cinema, or interested in how films can be structured in a very different way.
And now Stephen Palmer.
Chungking Express isn't my favourite Wong Kar-wai movie. No, that would be In the Mood for Love, which for me is pretty much the most perfect film in terms of acting, costuming, vision and sound. But there's something about Chungking Express that brings me back to it time and time again. And I think it's because it's a love letter to Hong Kong as much as it is a love letter to love. It's literally two films, with only two brief moments connecting the two. And two is the key word here. It's a movie where you can always compare the dualities between the two stories. The first, set at night. The second, during the day. The first, in Kowloon, on the mainland. The second, on Hong Kong Island. The title, Chungking, comes from Chungking Mansions, an infamous building on the Nathan Road in Kowloon, containing within it the most multicultural area of Hong Kong, full of backpacker hostels, of subcontinental and African restaurants and food stalls, and of course it's a hive of criminal enterprise, even more so since the walled city was demolished. And the express part of the title comes from the Midnight Express food stall in Lang Kwai Fong on Hong Kong Island, a favourite of tourists and business people. The two sides to a city-state, separated by but a few miles and of course the waters of Victoria Harbour. And then the film has these glimpses of the aeroplanes that used to come in low over Kowloon Island at the now defunct Kai Tak Airport. And then the central mid-levels escalator that helps transport the walking masses up the steep inclines of Hong Kong Island. Honestly, if you watch this film and aren't desperate to visit Hong Kong or use the film as a guide to spending the day there, well then there's just no hope for you. The stories themselves are tales of couples, and tales of a couple of policemen who have recently been dumped by the women in their lives. Takeshi Kanashiro's decides to pine for his lost love by eating only canned pineapple for a month, which will lead him to his birthday, after which he promises himself he will start again. And on that final day, at a bar, he meets the blonde-wigged Bridget Lin, a drug smuggler on the run after an operation using human mules has gone south. Kanashiro becomes obsessed with her. And who wouldn't? This is Bridget freaking Lin. And without knowing any of her story, he spends the night in a hotel room with her, basically protecting her, without ever knowing she's probably the sort of person he should be arresting. And when their chase night ends, they go their separate ways, but maybe both ready to reset their lives. And then, a mere millimetre away, and let's face it, in Hong Kong you're never more than a millimetre away from someone else, he brushes up against the next story in the form of the ultimate pixie dream girl Fei Wong, who works at the Midnight Express food stall. She has formed a crush on another policeman who has suffered a recent split, And this time it's Tony Leung Chiu-Wai's Cop 663, who has been dumped by his cabin crew girlfriend. When fate leaves the spare key to Leung's apartment in Wong's hands, she decides to get to know him by fixing it up while he is not around. Both stories tell tales of a lack of physical and emotional intimacy between couples in a place where everyone is ironically packed closer together than pretty much anywhere else on Earth. And yet, both stories end with a sense of hope, a sense that new beginnings are always just around the corner. And you know, it took me a few watches of this film to enjoy that first story fully, but repeated watches uncovered levels of enjoyment. But the second story, my word, if you don't fall in love with Faye Wong's character immediately, you must get medical help. So you've got this movie here about the glorious duality of Hong Kong. You've got the story about love and loss, but yet full of hope. You've got three of the greatest Asian actors of the modern age, along with a film-stealing performance from one of Asian music's biggest stars. God, you even get Wong's fabulous Cantonese cover of the Cranberries' Dreams. But most of all, Chungking Express is a story about Hong Kong in 1994. It's one of those movies where the city itself is a character, just like in Woody Allen's eponymous Manhattan or Wim Wenders' Berlin in Wings of Desire. If you haven't seen it, do yourself and your soul a favour and do so. And then as soon as this pandemic is over, book yourself a trip to Hong Kong and go and see this magical place while you still can.
The BFI South Bank and ICA will be screening Wong Kar-wai films throughout July, with more screenings to be announced. So that's it for now. Thanks again to Bun House and One's Tea Room for the sustenance. Don't forget you can find all of our previous episodes on Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and you'll never miss an episode. But for now, cheers.
Cheers.